The pallid light of dawn filtered through the window pane of a nondescript apartment nestled amidst the urban sprawl of Wilmington, Delaware. Sitting at the dining table was a figure of quiet resolve, Detective Jane Austell, a woman known not for her flair, but her unswerving dedication to justice. Her slender frame, a silent testament to her past battles, was hunched over a barely touched plate of eggs and toast, a silent tableau of tension and grim determination. Each bite she took was a victory, a defiance against an old nemesis, her eating disorder. She chewed slowly, with a sense of deliberation that contrasted the feverish race of her thoughts. Her solitude was interrupted by the shrill ring of the telephone. A call from the precinct was expected, yet she felt a strange knot of apprehension forming in the pit of her stomach. "Austell," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the static on the line. "Jane, we've got something." The voice on the other end was that of Detective Davis, her trusted confidant. His tone carried a weight that immediately piqued her interest. Something big and dangerous, tied up with the police station. Rumors had whispered of a secret harbored within the heart of Wilmington Police Station, a secret shrouded in unethical practices and the shadowy promise of biological weapons. She felt an icy shudder course down her spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. For where others saw a threat, she saw a challenge, a call to which she was compelled to respond. As she prepared to leave her apartment, she glanced back at the half-eaten breakfast. A grim smile tugged at her lips. This was a war, and she had just won a small but significant battle. Stepping out into the chill of the Delaware morning, she headed towards the imposing structure of the police station, a fortress that towered over the cityscape. It stood there, silent and brooding, holding its secrets close to its chest. "Remember, Jane," Davis had warned her during their conversation, "this is not a usual case. The rumors, they are deeply entwined with the personnel in the station. Don't trust appearances." She entered the police station, the daunting edifice swallowing her in its grim shadow. She cast one last glance at the sunlit streets of Wilmington before turning her gaze to the dark corridors within. There was a mystery to unravel, a wrong to be set right. The Wilmington Police Station, a hulking monolith of cold concrete and sterner hearts, swallowed Jane Austell into its cavernous belly. Its hallowed halls whispered tales of valor and virtue, but her sharp gaze caught the undercurrent of fear that shivered in the air. The lighting was sterile, casting long, sinister shadows that danced in her peripheral vision. Each echo, each footfall bounced off the austere walls, painting an eerie backdrop of suspense. The station was alive in a disconcerting manner, its veins pumping secrets instead of blood. Her first interaction was with Officer Wilkins, a man of formidable size and inscrutable demeanor. His eyes held a flicker of apprehension, betraying his otherwise stoic facade. "Detective Austell," he greeted, a forced cordiality in his voice. "What brings you here today?" The discourse was veiled in polite platitudes, each word chosen carefully, like navigating a field laced with potential mines. She watched as Wilkins expertly danced around her inquiries about the rumored activities, the air growing thicker with every non-answer he offered. Hours stretched into an agonizing waltz of shadows and secrets as she interrogated each officer. The same routine of evasion and deflection played out like a well-rehearsed act. Yet beneath this veneer, she could taste the tang of fear, potent and visceral. Her exploration led her to the bowels of the station, a labyrinthine basement that hummed with an unnatural energy. A particular door, secluded and heavily fortified, drew her attention. It pulsed ominously, a dreadful heart in this concrete body. Her request to explore further was met with guarded silence and, inexplicably, a hint of terror on the faces of the otherwise unflappable officers. Her last interaction for the day was with Sergeant Reynolds, a veteran with decades under his belt. His eyes were hard, yet when he glanced at the locked door in the basement, she saw a flicker of dread. His veiled warning came as a hushed whisper. "Some doors, detective, are better left unopened." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the police station was cast in an otherworldly glow, its austere facade rendered ethereal under the moon's pale gaze. Jane left the building, her mind filled with gnawing questions and troubling revelations. The city slept around her, blissfully unaware of the shadows lurking within its heart. Her reflection on the ride home was interrupted only by the gnawing pang of hunger, a reminder of her personal struggle, an echo of her unresolved battle. Her face hardened as she reached for the fruit in her bag, another small battle won in her unending war. Dawn arrived with a fresh wave of anticipation that crashed against the shores of Jane's resolute mind. The breakfast routine, a daily struggle against the shackles of her past, played out with increasing comfort. As she set out, a steely resolve sharpened her gaze. Today she would break through the ominous silence guarding the basement door. The Wilmington police station, under the gray shroud of mourning, appeared more as an ancient monument, a gravestone to forgotten truths, than a symbol of law and order. Its secrets whispered through the morning wind, elusive as ever. Inside, she strode purposefully toward Sergeant Reynolds, the stoic sentinel whose haunted gaze still echoed in her thoughts. A strained exchange followed, laced with pleas and threats, each volley of words probing for cracks in the other's armor. It concluded with a key, heavy with unknown horrors, landing in her hands. As she descended into the station's underbelly, the air grew colder, thicker, as though time itself had congealed around her. The door stood before her, more ominous now than ever, a beast in slumber waiting to be roused. With a deep breath, she turned the key. The door groaned open, revealing an abyss that defied explanation. The room was a gateway, a tear in the fabric of reality that yawned open to an alien world. She found herself staring into an abyss of swirling colors and shifting landscapes that ebbed and flowed like tidal waves. The sight was as dreadfully beautiful as it was horrifying, an impossibility that shook her understanding of the world to its core. It was a cosmic sea, a glimpse into an existence far beyond her world. The rest of her day unfolded in a haze, her mind stuck in the horrific beauty of the portal. Her interactions with the station's personnel took on a darker tone, their fearful glances making sense now. She understood the weight of the warning she had been given. Some doors were indeed better left unopened. As she returned home, the echoes of the portal's existence reverberated within her. Each bite she took for dinner held a newfound significance, a reinforcement of reality against the backdrop of the unimaginable. The simple act of eating became a grounding ritual, a reminder of her humanity amid the revelation of such inhuman vastness. The night veiled the city in its comforting darkness, a stark contrast to the alien realities she had glimpsed. She knew she had ventured past the point of no return, yet an inexplicable pull called her back to the abyss, back to the otherworldly landscapes that defied comprehension. She was a lone sailor now, caught in a cosmic storm. As she laid down to sleep, she braced herself for the voyage into the maw of the unknown, into the heart of cosmic terror. The abyss was waiting, and she would dive headlong into it. The Wilmington police station, a fortress of ominous shadows, stood before her once more. Its secrets, now partially unraveled, seemed to gaze at her through its cold, concrete facade. The portal awaited in the heart of the station, its presence of vile corruption spreading through the veins of the building. The door to the conduit yawned open as she approached, a silent acknowledgement of the dread that lurked beyond. And then she stepped through. Surreal vistas stretched out, warping and shifting under an impossible sky. Creatures that defied earthly comprehension moved in the distance, the land pulsating with their grotesque, unearthly beauty. Each excursion through the portal tested her sanity. The sights, the sounds, the feel of the alien worlds was a constant assault on her senses. But within this maelstrom of horror, she found a strength forged from the heart of her struggles. The more she explored the cosmic horror, the more she recognized the echoes of her personal battle against her eating disorder. Each time she forced herself to eat, to assert her will over her past, she was preparing for this, asserting her will against a reality that sought to consume her identity. Interactions with the station's personnel took on a macabre tone. She could see in their eyes a reflection of her own dread, coupled with a strange resignation, as though they had gazed into the abyss and surrendered to its will. She realized then the depth of the conspiracy she had stumbled upon, its roots entangling not just the police station, but her own existence as well. Days blended into nights as her exploration continued. Her life was split between two realities: the mundane familiarity of her apartment, her city, and the unimaginable vastness of the cosmic horror within the police station. She would wake, eat, and then step into the unknown. She knew that the true battle was just beginning, a fight against both her own demons and the cosmic horror that was now a part of her world. As she bit into her breakfast the next morning, her gaze hardened. She was ready. The abyss had stared back at her, but now it was her turn to stare back, and she would not blink. Her confrontation with the station's personnel was a tense ballet of revelation and accusation. Every question was a piercing shaft of light cutting through the veil of ignorance. Every response was a desperate defense against the onslaught of truth. Officer Wilkins was the first to crumble under her relentless inquisition. His admission was not merely of the portal's existence, but also of his own participation in maintaining the dreadful secret. His tear-stricken face mirrored the torment of his soul. As she revealed the monstrous truth to the other officers, she saw a multitude of reactions. Some faces mirrored Wilkins' guilt and regret. Others displayed denial or even defiance. Regardless, her words had sown the seed of truth in their hearts. Finally, she faced Sergeant Reynolds, the veteran who had first warned her about the dreadful door. He was silent, his gaze hardened as he listened to her revelations. When she finished, he merely nodded, in acknowledgement of her truth and his own failure. His eyes held a glimmer of respect and a whisper of sadness. Her return to her apartment that night was a journey of victory, not against the cosmic horror, but against the fear and ignorance that had imprisoned her in the station's personnel. The mundane familiarity of her surroundings now held a comforting embrace, a stark contrast to the alien landscape she had dared to navigate. Her dinner that night was a celebration, an act of joyful defiance. She reveled in the taste and the textures, acknowledging the pleasure of eating without the shadow of her past. It was a minor victory in the vast cosmic drama she was a part of, but it was hers to claim. As she settled down for the night, she was not afraid. She knew that come morning, she would eat, and she would face the day with renewed determination. The cosmos could wait. A stagnant mist shrouded the somnolent town of Dover as Daniel first set foot on its desolate train platform. It was a place where the modern world seemed to have reluctantly trickled in, leaving the town tethered precariously between past and present. Its sleepy calm belied the terror lurking beneath its facade. The reason Daniel, a journalist of moderate acclaim, was sent here, a macabre series of murders centered around the town's ancient museum. A generous soul, Daniel could not help but assist a frail old lady struggling with her suitcase, a natural act of kindness that allowed an easy introduction into the closely knit community. He hid his true purpose behind soft-spoken questions, engaging in casual chatter, casting seeds of trust among the townsfolk. That night, under the feeble glow of a single lantern, he dined at Eva's Eatery, the heart of Dover, where every local seemed to have etched their memories. He conversed with Eva, the weathered proprietress whose hearty laugh sang tales of resilience. From her, he extracted stories, one subtly tainted with an unspoken dread. She mentioned the museum, her voice falling into a whisper, her eyes clouded with fear. The lantern flickered as he probed further, and in that momentary darkness, his old fears stirred. He remembered how his past case had spiraled into an obsession, how paranoia had threatened his sanity. Pushing down his rising dread, he listened as Eva spoke of odd incidents, of strange objects, of the section of the museum forever closed to the public. Her words painted a cryptic image, one he was determined to decipher. And when the moon was eclipsed by the oppressive clouds and Dover was swallowed by an unnatural darkness, he stood before the museum's grotesque silhouette. Its Gothic spires reached out, like skeletal hands begging for salvation, as if mirroring his own desperation for answers. The ancient structure whispered promises of concealed truths and sinister mysteries. As the last light in Dover flickered out, plunging the town into an abyss, he understood the magnitude of his task. The quaint town hid not just a mystery, but an insidious dread that infected its cobblestone streets and weather-beaten homes. His silhouette, dwarfed against the intimidating museum, echoed his past trauma and future fears. As he closed the door of his lodgings behind him, the disquieting calm of Dover breathed out a collective sigh, bracing for the storm that was to come. The morrow's light was sickly, filtered through the autumn leaves that clung stubbornly to the ancient trees lining the cobblestone path to the museum. Daniel walked past buildings that wore the patina of time with stoic grace, the town's heart pulsating with silent dread, bringing him to the monument of mystery that loomed over Dover like a shrouded specter. Once inside the museum, his footsteps echoed in the cavernous expanse of the grand foyer. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of decaying books, the musk of antique artifacts, and the whispers of the past. Portraits of forgotten dignitaries gazed from lofty heights, their eyes imbued with a curious mixture of stoicism and concern, as though silently bearing witness to the unfolding macabre. He crossed the threshold into the forbidden section, led by Harold, the museum's aged curator, a man as enigmatic as the place itself. The labyrinthine halls of the museum's closed wing drew them in, the hushed stillness a stark contrast to the ever-present murmurs of the main exhibit. "You've got to understand, Mr. Daniel," Harold croaked, his trembling hands illuminating their path with a flickering lantern. "This place, it's not just bricks and mortar. It's alive with histories, tragedies, stories that refuse to die." His voice echoed through the ancient hallways, imbued with a reverence and fear that further tangled the mystery. As they delved deeper, the aura of dread seemed to throb with an unsettling rhythm. Daniel found himself drawn to an artifact, an uncanny piece in a glass case. It was an archaic idol of some cosmic deity, its shape ever-changing, as though slipping past his comprehension each time he tried to decipher its form. It radiated a palpable dread that sent shivers crawling down his spine. Seeing his reaction, Harold recounted its legend, a tale of calamity and sacrifice. The cryptic connections to the murder victims were uncanny. Each of them had a similar relic in their possession, artifacts imbued with the same indefinable aura of dread. As the day's light dimmed, the museum, with its labyrinthine corridors and chilling tales, had left an indelible mark on him. His skepticism and curiosity had forged a path into the past. Yet as he departed, he couldn't shake off the feeling of unseen eyes watching him, studying him, tethering him to an ominous fate. His paranoia, dormant until now, began to stir. As he walked the now deserted streets of Dover back to his lodgings, every shadow seemed alive, every whisper loaded with foreboding. Under the veil of an overcast morning, Daniel roved the twisted lanes of Dover, chased by the lurking whispers of paranoia. A mirror image of his own fears, the town bore a subtle transformation. Once welcoming faces now wore masks of inscrutability. Friendly streets morphed into a serpentine maze of dread. He couldn't dismiss the prickling sensation of being watched. It danced on the edges of his consciousness, an indistinct figure disappearing around a corner, an unusual rustle of leaves, a sudden chill slithering down his spine when he passed the eerily silent playground. Wary but undeterred, he found himself at the doorstep of the local library, a decaying monument to forgotten knowledge. Mrs. Hazel, the aged librarian, provided a treasure trove of Dover's history, her voice a brittle whisper among the musty books. From her, he discovered the shadowy side of the town's past, stories of strange cults, chilling rituals, and tales of cosmic entities whispered in hushed tones. The narrative was eerily similar to the tale spun by Harold, a thread of uncanny truth winding through the labyrinth of folklore and fear. As his paranoia swelled, so did the memories of his past case. In a flood of recognition, he drew parallels between the two. Just like before, he was delving into a story steeped in uncertainty, unreasoning fear, and elusive truths. The fear wasn't unfounded. The shadows, it seemed, were indeed lengthening towards him. A thread of fear ran through him, unsettling him to his core. He recalled the victims, the idol, the unseen watchers. The town, the museum, and the shadowy figures were interconnected in a tapestry of terror. They were puppeteers of this cosmic theater, using his paranoia to draw him into the darkness. With this revelation, the invisible veil that blanketed Dover lifted slightly, exposing the merest hint of the puppet masters pulling the strings. Their puppet had found his footing, and the true dance of terror was about to begin. Morning broke like a broken promise, the sun failing to penetrate the dense cloud cover. As Dover woke to a new day, Daniel woke to a new reality. His paranoia was no longer a solitary dance. It had partners, shadowy figures pulling at its strings. As he retraced his steps back to the museum, a new realization settled on him. He was a pawn on a cosmic chessboard, the object of a sinister game played by the cult of Dover. A sense of despair trickled in, and the town, once quaint and welcoming, revealed itself as a complex illusion, an elaborate stage set by the puppeteers. In the twilight gloom, he stood once again before the museum, its haunting silhouette casting a monstrous shadow on the ground. His reflection in its darkened windows showed a man spiraling into the vortex of paranoia, each swirl bringing him closer to a shocking revelation. Inside the museum, the idol pulsed with a sickening intensity. His fear, his obsession, his past and present all seemed drawn to this dreadful relic. He touched its glass case, its alien form shifting and undulating in the dim light. Suddenly, his world spun as a wave of overwhelming terror washed over him. His vision blurred, replaced by a horrifying panorama of cosmic horror. He was a minuscule entity on the edge of an infinite abyss, the puppets around him dancing to the tunes of unseen puppeteers. His sanity teetered precariously, the foundation of his reality crumbling. As he retreated into the perceived safety of his lodgings, he knew he was descending into madness. But as the walls of his sanity crumbled, he also knew he was getting closer to the truth. It was a race against time with his own sanity as the clock. The night was a thick, heavy blanket, swallowing the last vestiges of twilight. As Dover plunged into darkness, Daniel was drowning in his own depths. The careful facade of calm had shattered, revealing a man teetering on the brink of madness, his sanity a mere candle flickering against the cosmic winds of terror. Summoned by an irresistible pull, he found himself once more before the museum, its Gothic silhouette now a grotesque puppeteer beckoning him towards the final act of its ghastly drama. Inside the museum was a cathedral of dread. The relic called to him, its grotesque form undulating in the dim light, its alien pulse merging with his own. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the glass case. A jolt of raw, primal fear coursed through him, yanking him out of reality into the unfathomable depths of cosmic horror. He saw them, the puppeteers, the ancient cult cloaked in shadows, their faces masked with an unsettling blend of reverence and sadistic pleasure. He was their final pawn, his impending doom their ascension. The museum warped around him, reality melting away. The cosmic abyss mirrored his sanity, his life force being consumed by the unspeakable horrors of the unknown. In the horrifying climax of his descent, Daniel became the final piece of the macabre puzzle. His life force, his sanity, his essence were consumed, pulled into the endless expanse of cosmic dread. His physical form crumbled, surrendering to the void. The puppeteers, the cult of Dover, had won. And as dawn broke, the town shivered in the aftermath of a silent catastrophe. The museum stood, its facade concealing the unspeakable horrors of the previous night, a silent testament to the existence of the cosmic horrors that lurked beneath the veneer of normalcy. Dover remained, haunted by the echo of a man who had strayed too close to the truth, a poignant reminder of the existence of shadows that danced on the edges of sanity. The air in Newark, Delaware had a taste of tranquility, flavored with the underlying notes of ordinary life. The city, a quilt of historic and modern architecture, thrived on its quaintness, basking under the summer sun that painted every structure with an aureate glow. Evelyn Pierce, her shadow clinging to the sidewalk, made her way toward the local graveyard, her place of interest. Her heart was a glacial comet trailing its long tail of traumatic history, yet held an unyielding flame of kindness, radiating through her indomitable spirit. Entering the cemetery, a place caught between the echoes of the past and the sighs of the present, she found herself drawn to a particular gravestone, nestled among the others like a silent sentinel. This was not her first visit. The engraved names seemed to waver, each viewing manifesting a different name, a different epitaph. Today it read, "James Harrison, peace be upon the wanderer." She crouched beside it, her fingers tracing the cold stone as she squinted, trying to make sense of the elusive etchings. "Why does it change?" she murmured to herself, before taking out her notepad to jot down the day's inscription. "Evelyn!" a voice called from behind. It was Samuel, her partner, sauntering toward her. His smile, warm as sunshine on a spring day, never reached his eyes, a detail she had begun to notice. "The gravestone again?" he asked, raising a brow. His usual jovial tone held a hint of weary skepticism. She nodded, glancing back at the grave. He knelt beside her, his gaze following hers. "It's still James Harrison to me, Ev." Yet to her the name had changed again, now reading, "Martha Caldwell, the Ocean's daughter." She noted it down, her mind already swimming in questions. Samuel, loyal and trusting, was the ballast to her investigations. Yet the widening chasm in their shared experiences began to cast a shadow over their camaraderie. Their dialogue, filled with banter, laughter, and the easy rhythm of longtime friendship, filled the otherwise silent graveyard. It was only later that evening, under the cold gaze of the moon, that she returned to the gravestone alone. The name had changed yet again, a foreboding inscription that read, "Beware the cosmic tide." A chill swept across the graveyard, the ever-changing gravestone bearing its cryptic message under the pallid moonlight. Despite her analytical mind, a knot of dread coiled in her stomach, a sensation she had not experienced since the days of her oppressive past. As she left the cemetery, she cast one last glance at the ominous stone. A morbid fascination stirred within her, a lure she found herself unable to resist. In the quiet solitude of her small apartment, she pored over her notes, haunted by the gravestone's inscrutable warnings. She knew that something lurked in the undercurrent of the quaint city, something far beyond a simple grave fraud scheme. The days in Newark began to bleed into a kaleidoscope of uncertainty. Evelyn Pierce, bound to her path by a knot of curiosity and trepidation, found herself returning to the graveyard each day, the ever-changing gravestone becoming an enigma that gnawed at the edges of her sanity. The cryptic inscriptions whispered riddles under her fingertips, each new message being a veiled prophecy that she was struggling to understand. "Behold the darkened sky," read today's inscription, its words etched into the old stone, seemingly frozen in time for anyone else. But for her, they danced in an eerie ballet of metamorphosis. "Evelyn, are you sure you're all right?" Samuel, worry etched in his brows, had begun to express his concern more frequently. The playful banter that once punctuated their conversations had started to dissolve into a tense dance around the unspoken. Their friendship, once as steady as a lighthouse, now flickered uncertainly amidst the storm brewing. "Sam," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "The gravestone, it's not just names now. It's giving warnings." Samuel glanced at the stone, his face reflecting only the static name of James Harrison. "Ev, it's been a tough case. Maybe you need some rest." But Evelyn knew better. The stone's messages were not mere illusions, nor figments of an exhausted mind. They were omens, shadowed in cryptic phrases that seemed to hint at a looming catastrophe. Her dreams, once her refuge, began to morph into distorted landscapes of cosmic terror. Nebulous horrors from the abyss of the universe haunted her sleep, their formless shapes a paroxysm of grotesque beauty and chilling dread. She began to see glimpses of Newark not as it was, but as a playground for these cosmic horrors, where reality and madness weaved a tapestry of nightmare. As she fell deeper into this cryptic mystery, the veil of the quiet city began to thin, revealing glimpses of an underlying corruption that spread its tendrils into the heart of Newark. Unseen to most, it thrummed in the air, pulsed in the stone of the buildings, and whispered in the wind. She was no stranger to horror, her past a testament to her resilience. But this was a different kind of terror. It did not simply invade the mind, but gnawed at the fabric of reality itself. She held onto the love for her dear ones, her beacon in the ever-growing darkness. Her once secure world was teetering on the brink of chaos, yet the resolve in her heart was unwavering. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Samuel, the anchor in her turbulent reality, the trusted partner who had weathered countless investigations with her, began to twist into an unfamiliar figure. His smiles, once comforting beacons in the fog of her past, now felt painted, their sincerity tarnished. "You've been spending too much time in the graveyard, Evelyn," Samuel remarked one morning, his words a thin veil over his mounting apprehension. "This isn't like the other cases. It's consuming you." With her intuition prickling at his shifting demeanor, she felt a foreign chill curl around her heart. "Sam," she began, her voice steady, her eyes meeting his, "there's something happening in Newark, something we don't understand, and I believe that gravestone is the key." His silence, an entity itself, seemed to breathe life into her worst fears. "Or maybe," he said finally, his voice cold, "it's the key to your unraveling." Samuel's betrayal, when it came, wasn't with a bang, but with a soft, soundless implosion that sent shockwaves through her life. He manipulated her investigations, sabotaged her efforts, all in a desperate attempt to save her from a horror he himself couldn't comprehend. His deception, the gravestone's warnings, the looming cosmic terror, they wove around Evelyn like a triptych of treachery, mystery, and horror. Her dreams worsened, plagued by nebulous horrors that seemed to bleed into her waking moments, an oppressive dread tainting the once serene cityscape of Newark. The betrayal left a bitter taste in her mouth, a toxic reminder of the cruel manipulation she had once escaped. But she refused to crumble, her resolve, once merely a defensive shield, now hardening into a sword. With her loved ones at risk, her personal battle against the unseen horrors morphed into a desperate crusade. Her investigation led her into the underbelly of Newark, where the corruption throbbed with palpable energy. Her pursuit of truth began to illuminate the hidden layers of the city, revealing a network of whispers and shadowed faces who worshipped an entity beyond human comprehension, a cult devoted to the cosmic terror. Their words were hymns of chaos, their rituals, a macabre dance to appease the entity they referred to as the Dweller Beyond. As she dove deeper into the abyss, she found herself confronted by a dreadful realization. The changing inscriptions, the cryptic warnings, her unsettling dreams, Samuel's desperate efforts to thwart her investigation, and now the discovery of the cult, all pointed to one truth. The city was caught in the relentless grasp of an entity that fed on terror and chaos. "Evelyn," Samuel pleaded one day, cornering her in her small apartment, his eyes reflecting a desperate fear. "You need to stop. The more you dig, the more you invite it in." But she only met his plea with a defiant glare. "I will not stop, Sam," she replied, her voice steady. "Not until this horror is out in the open. Not until our city is safe." With every new revelation, her reality was twisted and distorted beyond recognition. Yet she refused to cower. It was no longer a mere threat, but a living nightmare. The gravestone's inscriptions became her guiding force, their chilling prophecies a map into the heart of the chaos. The city, under the pall of cosmic dread, held its breath, waiting for the final act in Evelyn's harrowing saga. Once a cheerful private investigator, she was now a defiant sentinel against the all-consuming horror. Gravestone, once a beacon of confusion, had now become a totem of resistance. The latest inscription, chilling in its prophecy, read, "Embrace the void to forge the bridge." She knew the time had come to face the terror directly. her past trauma and the recent sting of betrayal fueling her resolve. Her confrontation with the entity was not a battle of physicality, but a struggle of minds and souls, a dance on the precipice of sanity. "I know what you are," she whispered, her voice echoing through the quiet graveyard. "And I'm not afraid." In the stillness that followed, a dark pulse emanated from the gravestone, its vibrations carrying an eerie whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "Evelyn Pierce, join us." She looked at the gravestone, its once cryptic inscriptions now a twisted invitation. She thought of her loved ones, their faces a beacon in her darkening world. She thought of Samuel, his betrayal born of fear and desperate love. Her journey had led her to this terrifying precipice. To save her city, her loved ones, she knew what she had to do. She took a deep breath and stepped towards the gravestone. With every step, she felt her human fears dissolve, replaced by an almost alien acceptance. "I am Evelyn Pierce," she proclaimed, her voice steady, "and I accept your invitation." The union was unimaginable. Her senses exploded into a vast spectrum of awareness that was both terrifying and beautiful. She became a bridge, a conduit, a link between the humanity she had sworn to protect and the cosmic terror she had chosen to embrace. She became a cosmic sentinel, a keeper of the balance between the mundane world and the horrors beyond understanding. Her world was irrevocably changed. Trail and trauma had carved her path, but it was her courage and selflessness that defined her destiny. In her unimaginable union with the cosmic entity, she had found a strange peace, an acceptance that belied the horror of her choice. Her journey into the abyss was a testament to the strength of human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable horror, hope could thrive. Jack Monroe stood on the outskirts of Middletown's junkyard, a fortress of discarded relics, their shapes twisted in the afternoon sun. Rusting automobiles lay entwined with remnants of household items, forming an eerie tableau of human life. Moments of laughter, anguish, and mundanity surrendered to the passage of time. The whispering wind wound through the labyrinth of debris, its sigh echoing his inner turmoil. He saw himself in these abandoned things, used, battered, tossed aside. But where they lay dormant, he possessed a fierce spirit, fueled by resilience and a steadfast pursuit of redemption. He had been through his trials, the gnashing teeth of addiction, leaving scars deep within his soul. He stepped forward, his boots crunching on gravel as the junkyard gates creaked open. Within the heart of this seemingly ordinary place, beneath layers of rust and time, lay a mystery that beckoned him. "Welcome, Detective Monroe," greeted Albert, the local historian. Albert's face was a roadmap of wrinkles, each line denoting a story, a forgotten chapter of Middletown's past. Jack respected Albert and often sought his wisdom when dealing with the town's myriad eccentricities. "Albert," Jack acknowledged, "what have we found?" The historian led Jack to an excavation site, marked off by the haphazard arrangement of old machinery. A curious object peeked out from the dirt. A structure, certainly not natural, its geometries clashing with the surrounding chaos. Albert detailed his theory, explaining how this might be a part of an ancient settlement, predating any known civilization in Delaware. Jack knelt, his fingers brushing the cold, time-worn surface of the structure. He felt a shiver travel up his spine, his heart quickening. His past had taught him to recognize this feeling, the stirring of an unseen enemy. "I'll look into it, Albert. This place," he looked around, his gaze sweeping the vast expanse of the junkyard, "has secrets buried deep. I'll make sure they see the light." As the sun set, casting elongated shadows that danced with the rusted relics, Jack found himself immersed in a sense of foreboding that clung to the air like a chill. With one last glance at the unearthed structure, he made his way back to the town, the whispering wind trailing behind. In the light of a new dawn, Jack returned to the junkyard. This time, it wasn't the rusting objects that called to him, but the ancient structure, peering out from the earthen womb like a lost relic of time. As he delved into the excavation site, each shovel of dirt removed felt like a turn of a page in a book of ancient lore. His investigation drew the attention of curious townsfolk, but the junkyard remained a zone of apprehension. As they offered hesitant encouragement from the fringes, he felt the isolation weigh upon him. He realized that in his own way, he was as much a part of the junkyard as the forgotten artifacts around him. Each day, he unearthed more of the structure, its intricate carvings telling tales of a civilization unknown, its purpose shrouded in the fog of antiquity. Late into the nights, he pored over the unearthed symbols, their cryptic meanings turning his dreams into bizarre riddles of cosmic scope. Albert shared in Jack's fascination, bringing his wealth of local lore and historical knowledge to interpret the enigmatic markings. Through their deciphering sessions, Albert wove stories of forgotten peoples, their lives intrinsically tied with celestial forces, their rituals echoing a reverence for cosmic entities beyond human understanding. Some of these symbols, they point towards worship, or maybe fear, of something greater, Albert mused, his eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. The revelation brought a chill down Jack's spine, the echo of old trauma resurfacing. The fear of the unknown, the uncontrollable, had been a specter in his life. Yet here he was, staring into the abyss of a long-lost civilization's horrors and wonders. It was overwhelming, yet oddly comforting. The past had been dark, but he had walked through it. He could do so again. As the moon once again claimed the sky, the town of Middletown fell into an uneasy sleep. The junkyard, a quiet sentinel, bore witness to a world in flux. Jack, shrouded in thought, looked upon the unearthed structure one last time before retiring. This was no longer just a case. It was a journey into the heart of human existence, a dance with the shadows of forgotten times. The echoes of a forgotten civilization were growing louder, resonating with the rhythmic beating of his heart, pulling him deeper into a world where the ancient and the cosmic intertwined. Days turned into weeks, and Middletown found itself drawn into an uncanny twilight. An invisible veil of change had draped over the town, causing unease among its residents. Cats disappeared, crops withered overnight, and strange, fleeting shadows darted at the edges of vision. Jack recognized these not as random occurrences, but as threads weaving a tapestry of silent dread. In his heart, he felt a resonance with the anxiety that wrapped Middletown. It echoed his own past fears, his battle with addiction, the struggle of navigating through the shadows. This was a different darkness, though, one that connected the earthly with the cosmic. His days remained dedicated to the junkyard excavation, but his nights became haunted by the ominous signs that hung over Middletown. In the quiet solitude of his office, he immersed himself in the enigmatic symbols, his instincts drawing connections between the ancient civilization's cryptic lore and the unsettling events transpiring around him. "Looks like we've woken up something from its slumber, Jack," Albert confessed during one of their late-night sessions. The candlelight danced in his eyes, the flickering flames casting ghostly shadows on the walls. Jack looked up from his notes, the weary lines on his face deepening. "I was hoping it wasn't the case, Albert, but it seems we've stirred a malevolent force linked to this ancient entity we've been uncovering." Despite the growing dread, Jack found a purpose in the unfolding chaos. His past had hardened him, honed him to face the darkness. And now Middletown needed him, needed his courage to face the impending shadow. Reality in Middletown began to warp as the cosmic entity stirred in its ancient slumber. Time seemed to dilate, with days passing in a blink and nights dragging on into eternity. Muted sunlight filtered through an unearthly haze, casting long, grotesque shadows that writhed and curled around corners. Jack felt the veiled hostility emanating from the depths of the unearthed structure. The town, once a symbol of serene predictability, was now a canvas for the otherworldly entity's malevolent artwork. His investigation had peeled back the veil on a reality far beyond human comprehension, exposing Middletown to the gnashing teeth of the cosmic abyss. During one late-night study session, Albert's voice trembled as he read from an old dusty tome. It speaks of a celestial being, one that traverses through dimensions, sowing seeds of chaos in its wake. Its awakening signals a time of profound change. Jack looked out his office window, the sight of Middletown shrouded in an uncanny twilight making his heart clench. This was his fight, his addiction resurfacing in the form of a cosmic entity. The ghost of his past struggles guided him, his resolve hardening. "We won't let it take over, Albert. This town is stronger than it knows." The unearthed structure, now completely visible, stood like an alien monolith amidst the junkyard's chaos. People reported hearing dissonant whispers emanating from it, warping their dreams into cryptic nightmares. As the sinister events escalated, Jack found himself thrust into the role of Middletown's protector. Each day was a fight against the unseen, a struggle against the invading cosmic presence. He stood firm, his spirit unbroken despite the madness that threatened to drown him. One evening, as he ventured into the depths of the junkyard, he felt a palpable shift in the air. The whispers grew louder, the shadows darker. Something was happening. The cosmic entity was reaching out. Overhead, stars blinked out one by one, leaving the sky dark, mirroring the dread that settled in his heart. He stared at the monolith, its cold alien surface pulsating with an energy that hummed in his veins. He felt his fears, past and present, meld into one towering monstrosity. Yet he faced it, just as he had faced his own demons. The town slept uneasily, and he stood vigil, a solitary figure against the cosmic awakening. He had walked through the depths of his personal hell and emerged stronger. He was ready to guide Middletown through its darkest hour. In the blackened heart of the Middletown night, the cosmic entity stirred. It was a shadow, a whisper, a vibration that resonated through the very fabric of the town. Its awakening tore through the veil of reality, exposing the populace to the unfathomable vastness of the cosmic realm. Jack stood at the edge of the junkyard, his gaze fixed on the pulsating monolith. The unearthly structure, the harbinger of the entity's arrival, seemed to undulate under the starless sky, its surface rippling like a dark ocean under a moonless night. "Jack!" Albert's voice crackled over the radio. His words were punctuated by static, the electrical interference a testament to the entity's influence. "Remember, whatever happens, stay grounded. This is your town, your reality." As he stepped towards the monolith, Jack felt an electric shiver of fear. Yet beneath the raw terror, there was determination, the unyielding resilience that had carried him through the darkest corners of his past. "I understand, Albert," he replied, his voice steady despite the cosmic maelstrom unfolding around him. He approached the monolith, its whispered promises and threats intertwining in a symphony of chaos. It felt familiar, an echo of his past struggles, the temptation and the terror of addiction. He reached out, his hand almost touching the cold, pulsating surface. Just then, he felt a surge of emotion. Memories flooded back, the loneliness of his childhood, the terror of his abuse, the pain of addiction, the strength of recovery. This was his fight, the climax of his journey. The cosmic entity was no different from his past demons. It was an intruder, a menace, a darkness that sought to snuff out the light of his world. And just like he had done before, he would stand his ground. He met the entity's silent roar with a quiet defiance, a reaffirmation of his reality. "You don't belong here," he whispered into the void, his words resonating with the strength of his conviction. The monolith shuddered, the entity's whispers turning into a dissonant wail. Yet as the night gave way to the first rays of dawn, the ominous structure began to dissolve. The entity, faced with Jack's indomitable spirit, was retreating, its cosmic dread diminishing under the brightening sky. As the sun rose, bathing Middletown in a comforting glow, the junkyard returned to its mundane chaos. The townsfolk woke from their eerie dreams to a familiar world, the shadow of the cosmic horror fading into a distant memory. Jack, forever changed, emerged from the junkyard, the silent sentinel of a town that had peered into the abyss and survived. He bore the scars of his cosmic encounter, a testament to his resilience and the power of human spirit against the inscrutable cosmic horror. Under a slivered, waning moon, the sleepless town of Glasgow, Delaware, lay sprawled like a dormant beast, its cobweb charm shrouded in a hushed and uneasy tranquility. Edwin Hargrave, a man more acquainted with solitude than he wished, walked the spectral streets, the echo of his footsteps piercing the silence like a somber metronome. His middle-aged silhouette, weathered yet unyielding, cut a solitary figure against the backdrop of the quaint colonial buildings. Behind a pair of soft eyes that hid a world of unspoken sorrows, Hargrave was a quiet man, his persona exuding an aura of muted resilience. He was known more for his unwavering sense of fairness than for the silence that was his perennial companion. Stopping before an old, weather-beaten newsstand, he cast his gaze upon a stack of newspapers, his latest exposé staring back at him from the front page. Yet his victorious feat seemed inconsequential under the pallid moonlight, for his heart was burdened by a different beast. His childhood was a memento of loss, his parents' absence a wound that time had forgotten to heal. The spectral echoes of that harrowing past propelled him into journalism. Each story was a quest, each missing person a chance to rescue someone from the clutches of loneliness that once consumed him. Echoplex was his latest challenge, the pulsating epicenter of Glasgow's drug underworld. The nightclub was a mirage of neon and shadow. This grim playground had become a refuge for lost souls, entrapped in the narcotic haze and deafening beats. "Can't sleep, Hargrave?" The night silence was sliced by a gruff voice. Samuel "Sammy" Travers, the stooped, aged newsstand owner, regarded Edwin with rheumy eyes. "Can't afford to, Sammy," Edwin smiled, a sad curling at the corners of his lips. "Got a city that's slowly losing itself." Travers grunted while folding a newspaper. "Ain't nothing new, son. Glasgow's been asleep for years. You keep fighting the inevitable." Edwin lingered on Sammy's words, finding their resignation unsettling. He knew Glasgow was slipping away, but he refused to stand idle. He was on a mission. He had seen the insidious tendrils of fear snaking through the city, heard the whispers of despair riding on the midnight wind. As the first light of dawn began to diffuse the monochrome night, he ventured towards Echoplex. The nightclub loomed ominously, a beacon of his fears and his aspirations. Echoplex swallowed him into its vibrant belly, a monstrous kaleidoscope of neon excess and frenzied rhythm. The pulse of the nightclub was a living entity, thrumming with intoxicating energy, fueled by the revelers who surrendered themselves to its hedonistic allure. It was a labyrinth of shadows and echoes, the ceaseless symphony of electronic music reverberating through its tangled heart, as if the building itself was breathing. He moved through the crowd like a silent specter navigating the sea of nameless faces. His sharp eyes scanned the revelers, veiled under the transient guise of ecstasy and oblivion, only to flit back to the nightclub's alluring vortex. An enigmatic dread began to grip him, much like the cobwebs of unease that clung to the quiet streets of Glasgow. Yet he remained rooted, for he was chasing more than just the ghost of a story. "Care for a drink, mister?" A sultry voice snapped him from his reverie. The bartender, a woman of mystifying allure, held out a fluorescent concoction, her eyes glinting with an unreadable depth. He shook his head. "Just information, if you can spare it." She leaned forward, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Dangerous currency around here." He pressed on, unperturbed, questioning her about the drug peddlers. His unassuming charm gradually chipped away at her initial hesitation. She divulged snippets about the regulars, men who dealt in whispers and underhand exchanges, peddling the poison that was gripping Glasgow. In the midst of this information exchange, a sudden silence fell over him. The throbbing music faded into a distant echo, and he caught a glimpse of a spectral figure amidst the crowd. A lost soul, its face continually shifting and contorting, yet eerily familiar. His heart clenched as the face briefly morphed into the long-gone visage of his deceased parent. The apparition was fleeting, disappearing as quickly as it had emerged, leaving him shivering in a cold dread. The Echoplex was not just an epicenter of drug trade, it was a doorway to something far darker, a truth beyond his comprehension. With his first vision in the belly of the nightclub, he was now tethered to the Echoplex, drawn into the dance of the monstrous unknown. The spectral apparitions that had first haunted him within the nightclub's pulsating womb now began to bleed into his everyday reality, blurring the line between the physical world and the spectral plane. Their faces, a ceaseless maelstrom of shifting expressions, echoed the faces of the lost souls he sought to find. The horrifying visions seemed to breathe with a life of their own, gnawing at his sanity and leaving him questioning the very nature of his existence. Despite his growing terror, he maintained his relentless pursuit of the drug peddlers. His encounters with them were bathed in a spectral light, their voices an echo from a dream. Every interrogation, every revelation led him further into the labyrinths of the cosmic horror that lurked beneath Glasgow's facade. One day, over a steaming cup of coffee, Sammy peered at him with concern etched across his face. "You look like a man who's been wrestling with shadows, Hargrave." Edwin gazed at Sammy, a solemn expression clouding his face. He could sense Sammy's worry, yet he felt incapable of articulating the monstrous reality that had ensnared him. "I'm wrestling with something, Sammy," he admitted, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Something inexplicable." Sammy's eyes widened with concern, but Edwin deflected further questions with a wry smile. How could he tell Sammy that the quiet, sleepy town of Glasgow was at the precipice of an unknown, terrifying abyss? He bore this secret alone, isolated within his personal twilight zone. As he lay in his bed that night, he saw them again. The spectral apparitions twisted and contorted, their ghastly faces pressing against the fabric of his reality. He recognized them now. They were the lost souls of Glasgow, ensnared within the eerie labyrinth of the Echoplex. His destiny was now intertwined with the nightclub. The cosmic horror that resided within was an inescapable reality, a horrifying truth that gripped his existence. He realized with mounting dread that he was not merely an observer, but an unwilling participant in this unfolding existential nightmare. And as the chilling grip of terror threatened to consume him, he understood that his journey into the heart of the Echoplex was far from over. The daunting task of unraveling the insidious connection between the drug trade and his nightmarish visions awaited him. The shroud of dread that blanketed Edwin deepened with each passing day, the whispers of his nightmares becoming increasingly strident. The boundary between his waking world and the ghostly visions blurred further, Glasgow transforming into a labyrinthine mirage that resonated with the sinister pulse of Echoplex. His world was no longer divided into realms of light and dark. It had become a fractured kaleidoscope of intermingling realities. His investigation led him deeper into the Echoplex, each clandestine transaction he witnessed bearing an eerie resonance with his spectral apparitions. The narcotics, the music, the lost faces, all seemed to be connected by a sinister, unseen thread. One evening, within the shrouded confines of the nightclub, he chanced upon a secret door leading to a dimly lit basement. His heart pounded in his chest as he descended, each step echoing his mounting dread. The sight that awaited him was beyond comprehension. Vats of luminescent liquid pulsed with an alien energy, their glow casting long, twisted shadows on the walls. Men and women, their faces obscured, worked methodically, mixing the peculiar substance with regular narcotics. His eyes widened as the realization dawned upon him. The narcotics had their origins in this insidious, alien substance. The nightclub, the Echoplex, was not merely a den of vice, but a nexus between their world and another, far more sinister dimension. He staggered back, his mind reeling with this revelation. The world around him spun. The ground beneath him seemed to shift and waver, threatening to pull him into the pulsating abyss of cosmic horror. The visions he had been plagued with suddenly took on an even darker, more ominous hue. He returned to the surface, grappling with the monstrous reality that unfolded beneath the nightclub. The faceless crowd, the pounding music, the shimmering lights of Echoplex now seemed like an elaborate facade, hiding a terrifying truth from the oblivious citizens of Glasgow. As he wandered through the city streets, He was haunted by the eerie echoes of the lost souls trapped in this horrifying spectacle. Their faces followed him, their silent screams reverberating in his mind. He was not just uncovering a story, he was unearthing a secret that threatened to shatter the very fabric of his reality. Edwin stood at the edge of a precipice, staring into the monstrous abyss that had once been his quiet existence. The kaleidoscopic reality of Glasgow, now veiled with the dread of Echoplex, pulsated with an eerie harmony. His every step was now laden with the chilling awareness of the sinister labyrinth that ensnared his city, his own life twisted in its dreadful dance. Despite the gnawing dread, he forged ahead, his resolve hardened by the desperate cries of the lost souls he now recognized in his visions. He carried their silent pleas like a sacred promise, his pursuit no longer merely a journalistic investigation, but a quest for salvation. His attempts to expose the horrors of Echoplex were met with disbelief and dismissal. Sammy, his confidant, offered sympathy but couldn't comprehend the cosmic terror that he relayed. The world around him seemed oblivious, their reality untouched by the monstrous underbelly of the Echoplex. Despite the mounting isolation, he remained undeterred. His relentless pursuit led him back to the nightmarish belly of the nightclub. Armed with his unyielding resolve and the strength lent by the lost souls in his visions, he sought to sever the insidious connection between the two worlds. In the dimly lit basement, he confronted the silent operators of the monstrous machinery. His words echoed off the cold, grimy walls, a desperate plea for cessation. But the faces that turned towards him were devoid of recognition or remorse, their eyes reflecting the terrifying abyss he sought to close. In the ensuing chaos, he sabotaged the pulsating vats of alien substance. As the eerie glow dimmed, he could feel the fabric of his reality shudder, the spectral visions that had haunted him fading into the darkness. He emerged from the depths of the Echoplex, his body trembling with the adrenaline of his daring act. The nightclub, once alive with pulsating energy, now felt eerily subdued. He had disrupted the flow of cosmic horror into their world, at least for the time being. He stepped onto the quiet streets of Glasgow, his heart heavy yet hopeful. He knew the cosmic horror was not entirely vanquished. It was a lurking menace lying dormant in the underbelly of his city and his consciousness. Yet he had given the lost souls of Glasgow a respite, however fleeting. In the end, Edwin was not the hero of a triumphant tale, but a quiet sentinel standing vigil against the encroaching darkness. For in his heart, he knew that the dance with the cosmic horror was far from over, and when the time came, he would be ready to face the monstrous abyss once again. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed our content, show your support with a like and subscribe, and stay notified by hitting the bell icon. Expect more cosmic horror from Eldritch Tales Factory, and feel free to explore our other stories. See you in the next video.